Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. Hey, before we jump in, if you appreciate this kind of in-depth analysis, please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. All right, let's get to it. Today, we are cutting through all the theoretical chatter to look at exactly how a tiny 60-mile corridor could literally decide the fate of the Baltic states. We're going to break down the integrated air defenses, the heavy armored deployments, and ask the tough question: is the Suwalki Gap an indefensible choke point that could collapse European security in a real, high-stakes fight?
Okay, so let's unpack that. We are talking about just 65 kilometers of land. That's it. This tiny stretch is called the Suwalki Gap, and it is the one and only land connection between the Baltic states, that's Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and the rest of their NATO allies. It is their absolute lifeline. So you can see, whoever controls this little gap really holds the keys to their survival. It's the difference between them being connected to Europe and being completely cut off, isolated.
So let's get a picture of the map in our heads. The Suwalki Gap is this thin little corridor that runs along the border between Poland and Lithuania. Now, what makes its location so dangerous is what's on either side of it. If you look to the west, you've got Kaliningrad, a small piece of Russia that is absolutely packed with military hardware. And then you look to the east, and you have Belarus, which is, for all intents and purposes, a Russian military staging ground. This really unique and frankly dangerous geography is why experts call it the crack in the wall of NATO's defense. It's this one fragile land bridge, an artery, that if it were ever severed, would leave 3 NATO allies totally stranded from any help on the ground.
Now, this slide here draws a fantastic parallel to history. If you remember the Cold War, NATO's biggest nightmare was something called the Fulda Gap in Germany. It was this big, wide-open plain, just perfect for a massive Soviet tank army to pour through. The strategy there was pretty straightforward: throw everything you have at them to blunt that frontal attack. But today, the Suwalki Gap is the new strategic hotspot, and the problem is completely flipped on its head. It's not about stopping a massive invasion into the heart of NATO anymore. No, it's about keeping this incredibly fragile lifeline to the edge of the alliance open. The mission isn't just to stop an army. It's to prevent 3 allies from being choked off.
Let's zoom in on that threat, because it's really all about the geography. You've essentially got this natural pincer formation. You have Russian military power sitting on both sides of this narrow corridor, just ready to squeeze it shut. And this is what makes the Kaliningrad such a tempting target. In military terms, it's high strategic value for a low operational cost. What that means is a relatively small, quick operation here could score a massive strategic victory for an adversary: the complete isolation of the Baltic states.
And a huge part of that pincer's power comes from a concept called A2/AD. That stands for anti-access/area denial. The easiest way to think about it is like a giant invisible keep-out bubble. Kaliningrad is bristling with these systems. We're talking integrated networks of top-tier S-400 air defense missiles, Iskander ballistic missiles that can strike deep, and powerful electronic warfare systems. All of it is designed to make it incredibly dangerous, if not impossible, for NATO planes, ships, or ground forces to get anywhere near the region.
And this table here, it just lays out the problem perfectly. First, that tiny 65-kilometer width, it means a pincer attack could close the gap incredibly fast, leaving the Baltics on their own. Second, that A2AD bubble from Kaliningrad, it can reach out and hit any NATO reinforcements trying to make their way in. Then, from the other side, Belarus is basically a pre-positioned staging area, ready to go. And finally, the terrain itself, lots of forests and tricky ground, is perfect for small-scale sabotage and infiltration, what analysts call Phase 0 operations, designed to create chaos before the main attack even starts.
So what would a real attack look like? Well, it could happen with terrifying speed, maybe in just 48 to 72 hours. It would likely kick off with a massive volley of missiles and drones from Kaliningrad to saturate the airspace. Right after that, armored forces would push in from both sides, the pincer move. At the exact same time, long-range missiles would be hammering any roads or railways trying to bring in reinforcements. The endgame? To completely seal the corridor, leaving NATO with a horrible choice: either risk a full-blown war to force it back open, or accept that 3 of your allies are now cut off.
So, faced with that nightmare scenario, how do you even begin to defend against it? Well, what we're seeing now is a massive shift in NATO's whole way of thinking. They're moving away from a strategy of deterrence by reinforcement, which is the old idea of letting an enemy take some ground and then fighting to get it back. The new strategy is deterrence by denial. The goal now is to build a shield so strong that it makes seizing the corridor impossible in the first place.
And this is what that new shield actually consists of. It's not just a simple wall. It's a smart, layered defense called the Baltic defense line. Yeah, we're talking about concrete things like bunkers, pre-planned minefields, and anti-tank obstacles. But the real key is tying all of that together with modern technology. Drones, distributed sensors, and constant surveillance all network together. The logic is simple. Slow an attacker down, force them into preset kill zones, and enable devastating precision strikes from the very first minute of any conflict. But look, all the fortifications in the world are useless if you can't get your main forces there in time. And this has always been NATO's biggest headache in this region. So now, two huge projects are underway to fix this logistical nightmare once and for all: Rail Baltica and the creation of a military mobility area.
Honestly, the Rail Baltica project is an absolute game changer. For decades, the Baltic states used the old, wider Russian-style railway gauge, which was different from the rest of Europe. This meant that every single tank, every truck, every piece of equipment had to be stopped at the border, unloaded from one train, and painstakingly reloaded onto another. It was a logistical disaster. Rail Baltica is building a brand new, standard European gauge track all the way through the region. And the impact is just staggering. A single train of supplies can now replace a truck convoy that would have been 7 kilometers long. It's a massive improvement, and that's happening alongside deeper military cooperation on the ground. For example, Poland's 15th Mechanized Brigade and Lithuania's famous Iron Wolf Brigade now train, plan, and operate together with the specific mission of defending the gap. This isn't just for show. It's about making sure that two allied armies can fight like a single, seamless unit, with absolutely no gaps for an enemy to exploit.
And then, very recently, the entire strategic map of this region was just torn up and completely redrawn. I'm talking about the accession of Finland and Sweden into NATO. This single political move has been an incredible game changer. It has effectively transformed the Baltic Sea from what could have been a major conflict zone into what many are now calling a NATO lake.
This gives NATO a whole new set of tools. Suddenly, the Swedish island of Gotland, right in the middle of the Baltic, becomes this unsinkable aircraft carrier, a central hub for intelligence and naval power. It provides a way to reinforce the Baltics by sea, which means NATO is no longer totally reliant on that one vulnerable land corridor. And then you have Finland's enormous border with Russia. That forces Moscow to spread its military thin, instead of concentrating everything on the gap. On top of that, you get Sweden's world-class submarine fleet, which is perfect for these waters, and both countries bring a total defense mindset that hardens their entire societies against hybrid attacks.
So, when you start to put all these new pieces together, the physical fortifications on the ground, the massive logistical upgrades, and this huge new strategic depth from the Nordic allies, you can see the new strategy really taking shape. The objective is no longer to make plans for how we might one day liberate the Baltic states. The objective now is to make an invasion so difficult, so costly, and so certain to fail that it becomes completely unthinkable to even try.
This quote right here just nails it. It perfectly captures that new mindset. Deterrence by denial is all about raising the price of aggression so impossibly high that no one ever dares to pay it. It's a fundamental shift away from having a small tripwire force that's just there to trigger a bigger war after an invasion has already happened. Now the idea is to have a robust defense in place that can defeat an attack right then and there as it happens. It's about turning the Suwalki Gap from NATO's biggest weakness into a hardened fortress. But of course, the fight isn't just about tanks and trenches anymore. The modern battlefield is far more complex. We also have to factor in non-conventional threats, things like widespread GPS jamming, massive cyber attacks, and relentless disinformation campaigns, all of which are designed to sow chaos and paralyze the response before the first shot is ever fired.
So there's no question. The Suwalki Gap is being transformed. You have the Baltic defense line. You have logistical game changers like Rail Baltica. And now you have the incredible strategic depth provided by Finland and Sweden. The entire calculus has changed. A fortress is definitely being built. But that brings us to our final lingering question. In this modern era of hybrid warfare, of constant electronic disruption, and of those murky below-the-threshold attacks, is any wall, no matter how strong, truly impassable? We'll leave you with that thought. Thank you so much for joining us. Please, if you found this valuable, like, share, and subscribe to the Global War Watch Network. We really want to hear what you think, so drop your thoughts in the comment section below. And join the wider conversation on our social media channels. You can find all the links in the description.